Welcome to Unlock CX, the podcast where we explore innovating customer engagement, brought to you by Anywhere 365. We'll be talking with industry experts about great strategies that create memorable customer experiences. And now, let's unlock this episode.
So, welcome today at the Unlock CX podcast. Today, we actually have two new people joining. I have a new sidekick, or maybe I'm the sidekick, I'm not sure, but that's Marius. He's the head of sales in APAC. And then we have someone joining from KPMG, Fiona Wilhelm. She's the customer success director. And it's really cool because I'm actually now based in the Netherlands. Then we have Marius, who's based in Perth. And then there's Fiona, who's based in Brisbane. So welcome both of you, and thanks a lot for joining. So what I always do is I Google a bit, I scroll a bit around, and what I found is that Fiona, you're an innovation coach, and I was actually really curious. What does that mean?
Innovation. Well, I think, to be honest with you, so much of innovation is to do with like empathizing. So I feel like it's more like, people talk about innovation as something that you're trying to create like new business models. You're trying to, work in new ways. So really, innovation coaching is really about getting people to empathize and getting them to think differently. So using things like design thinking.
Okay. And for instance, you say, because you say something about empathizing, right? What do you mean by that? Because I also saw this coming back a lot in your when I Googled you.
Yeah, I think it might be one of the things that I'm probably known for. Just some of the work that I've done both inside professional services and outside. Empathizing is really, I guess, walking in the shoes of the people that you're trying to, the end user. So if for example, it was coming up that your product was going to be used by mothers of young children, for example, then you wouldn't make anything that you need two hands to use, because they've always got, a child in one arm, and the app better be able to be used with one hand, right? So it's things like that. It's really going through the whole customer experience journey and recognizing that even the physical side of it can be a challenge if you don't know what those challenges of those particular people are.
Okay, good. And what I was also wondering, you already gave a good example by walking in the shoes of the customer. Are there any companies that you feel that are doing a really great job at this?
I feel like at the moment, I feel as if like Uber is doing some interesting things in that space. But then again, I feel like it's the only reason I think some companies are doing well in that space is because they're experimenting. So I don't think there's anybody that's really nailing it. Maybe, companies like Slack that started off as a communication platform between gamers. I feel like the way that, interestingly, things like Slack, it starts to pick on things like that people can feel isolated and how it kind of builds community. So I think it all kind of comes back to the basics of humanity. And I think what are the things that we all need? So, if you look at Uber, it would be like storytelling and sense of connection. They're doing that really well.
And do you maybe have an example? Because for me, Uber is just the app where I get the taxi. In the Netherlands, they are taxis. They're licensed taxi drivers. But I'm just wondering, what is like the specific example of the storytelling that goes along with it?
Well, for example, like I was thinking a couple of things recently. I'm about to have like a housewarming, and it has like a Mexican theme. And I was like, where can I find like a Mexican chef to come and do this work? And I'm like, I talked to this guy in the Uber, and he's like, I'm a chef. I'm from Mexico. like you can find services through these, and I feel like there's an opportunity with partnerships as well for Uber, where they're like, my first question to Uber drivers is, when you're not driving Uber, what are you doing? And maybe it's just that we're really friendly in Brisbane and people do a lot of that, but I find it's an awesome networking opportunity. So yeah.
No, yeah, true. And Marius, do you feel that there are any companies other than Uber and maybe Slack that are doing a really good job in that part, in the customer experience part, where they really empathize with their customers?
So while Fiona was talking, I was thinking, how do you empathize on scale? Because, typically most organizations are driven by profit. And because your customer base have got so many buyer profiles, not everybody cares about, are you being empathetic? We just want the best price. But I would say here in Australia, probably, and Fiona might think of a few examples, but I think our healthcare funds are typically quite good at showing empathy and more around the process of, when you need medical healthcare, it's quite a traumatic experience. I'd say, and luckily I think the other thing that came to mind is also the funeral services here in Australia. There's quite a bit of, in their marketing, about, supporting people going through a stressful and sad period. Those are probably the two main ones I can think of, the health funds and the funeral industry.
Okay. And what I was also wondering is you speak a lot about people and products. So how can those products help connect the people? And I know this is maybe a bit of an open door question, but still there are, of course, there's so many different products that connect people. So how can products do that the best way? Maybe that's a better question.
So I would say that it all stems back to one thing. What is the job that they're trying to get done? So is it that they need to book, I don't know, a babysitter? Or is it that they need to, scale their business because they just don't have enough resource? Like, what is the highest pain point, and what does the utility of what you're offering, how does it help to relieve that pain? So, for me, for example, I don't want to ride in a taxi because I find it really transactional. And I actually like that my money goes back to the community. So it's like it comes back to values, So, yes, it's kind of like that whole conversation around sort of recycling or sustainability. If it's not solving an immediate pain and it's a long-term thing, it's really hard to get people engaged.
Yeah. No, and I was actually now thinking also as well, right, about the example that you gave about the baby, the babysitter needs, that you're doing that with one hand, there's the kid in one arm, and then the other one. So it also really needs a good UI, right? The user interface, because people need to, make sure that they are able, just with your thumb, to order that babysitter. And there was something else that came actually quite often back in when I did my research. Google was my best friend, and that was the self-service part of it. So how does a product empathize with people and has a good self-service system? And maybe you have an example of that?
Yeah, and I think this is something that Marisa and I have been talking about quite a lot when it comes to Anywhere 365 as well, because there's, I think it's about 81% of people that when they're looking for help or support, they actually don't want to talk to anybody. And I think we've got this weird perception, and I think, again, this comes back to not walking in the shoes of the customer, is if you don't want to talk to someone, what do you want? So is it that you really like online chat and actually not pushing them into a situation where it's like, oh, why don't you leap through another hoop and have to then go into a portal? Like, the great thing about the Anywhere 365, sort of customer engagement layers is that it's, there's lots of different ways to engage, and it's not forcing the customer. It's their choice how they want to engage.
Yeah, maybe Marius, you can elaborate a bit on that as well.
I was going to agree with Fiona. I think, like I mentioned earlier, our customer profiles vary from generations, and they prefer to engage in different ways. And I'll give a good example of that. When it comes to self-service, I look at my son who's 12 years old. He hates phoning somebody, but if there's a chat bot or there's a form that he can fill in, he'll go with it. And then a good example, this week I've been helping a non-for-profit who here in Australia is helping and delivering legal services to the Indigenous population around Australia, working for the government. And as we started talking about omni-channel services, and he cut me off and he said, my customers prefer to pick up the phone and call. So you can never assume that, you got to give customers and clients the option how they want to connect with you, and also give them the ability to go from one to the other. One of the customers I'm working with in the travel industry in Australia, they deliver a lot of online services, and through their chatbot, they would actually start giving people the option to change flights and make bookings. And they've trained their chatbot that if somebody says anything like, I need to talk to an agent or talk to a human, it'll transfer it to the Anywhere 365 chat service, and they can actually chat live with the service and then obviously broker a phone call if need be. So you've got to be flexible with how you deliver services. The thing I wanted to say about empathy as well, we have to accept now today, I'm a big fan of Seth Godin, and Seth always talks about we find our tribe. Now, in the old days, before the internet and Google and these things, it was quite hard to find your tribe unless you bumped into somebody. And these days, what's happening is, it's very easy for us to find a company or a community that we actually fit in with. And so I think people also have to acknowledge that you've got to be able to adapt the way that you communicate with your customers in the way that they would see fit.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, yesterday I was also talking to one of our colleagues in marketing, and we were wondering, okay, where did I really receive like a good self-service piece as well? Because indeed, I want to fix it myself, and I'm sort of also, maybe it's my ego, but sometimes I'm a bit frustrated with the people that they think I don't know anything, and I don't know why that is, because then I already tried resetting, and when, for instance, when the Wi-Fi is not working, right? We all have it sometimes, I then call the provider. I'm a caller, and what happens then is that they are sometimes treating me like I don't know anything, like. And I'm serious, I already tried this, but they still sometimes need to work on a script, and I understand that, but it also frustrates me. But then if I, in that same conversation, I also spoke about Dell. And this is already, I think, an experience of 10 years, maybe even longer ago, but it's still in my head, where I again called, and this person was not treating me like I didn't know anything. He actually said, okay, what have you already done? Okay, and then moved forward from them. And there was a big part of the empathy where I was lacking with the Wi-Fi provider. That was lacking, but there was with Dell. And and also it was one of the first ones that only had like that you could only order the laptops online, and that everything was online. And I thought there was because I first thought, I was a bit hesitant. Should I order a Dell? I cannot go to a shop to actually, get things fixed. But they picked up the laptop at home. It got sent back at home when it was finished. And it was actually way more of a better experience than I have ever had. So yeah, that was a really nice one.
It sort of comes back to like respect as well. Like if you think about it, that's really respecting your time, but you really have to meet people where they are. So like, for example, even the questions, the customer experience can be the types of questions. So he didn't say to you, oh, have you tried switching it off and back on again? Or like, those really helpful tips. And so he kind of met you where you were to find out what you'd done already. But it's amazing how even you could set up probably the chatbot algorithms to be like, what have you already tried, and then build on machine learning from things that, why wouldn't we take like the people who are the best at customer experience and then add that to, start with the types of questions that they ask, because, it's all the AI engineering stuff now too, which is just kind of leading. And what if we could create like a kinder experience, a more respectful and kind of inclusive experience.
Yes, but there you would also have the danger, of course, in that AI, like, do we really notice that it's not a human? Like, because sometimes people can be frustrated. So how, and this question is directed to both of you, how do you think that you can solve that part?
What do you think, Marius?
The empathy in AI.
Yeah, I would say it is probably more a question of when do you introduce the AI. I think a lot of companies have jumped onto this bandwagon of the AI without doing proper testing and adoption, testing with customers and testers. So, and when it frustrates a customer, we all know that one bad experience or a bad first impression really ruins a relationship. And so what I see with our Anywhere 365 customer base here in Australia and New Zealand, I would say in particular, they've taken a very mature take on this, in the sense that they do extensive testing, not just with people internal of their company, because very often, we know our product, and so we're probably not going to react or use the bot the same way. But I think we've seen some leaps and bounds where there's a lot of data gathering and machine learning happening before they actually introduce the AI. And I'd also say that from an AI perspective, I think there's still a lot of companies that are sitting on the fence because there's a lot of discussions going on about legislation around AI. So the early adopters probably adopted a little bit too early before it was a mature technology. And I'd say probably in the next year or two, we'll probably see people adopting it a bit more. But I've never actually seen a framework that I've found online that actually, what sort of framework can you use to introduce a good customer experience? I think Fiona and KPMG, they've got some skills around that, and they've been doing a lot of training. So I think maybe Fiona can give us some insights.
Yeah, no, I love that you're saying as well. It's not that it doesn't become this like blanket thing. It's like, when does it make sense in that kind of end-to-end user journey to introduce it? Like, how could you, I guess even, because it's not, you can't really remove like the bias from it as well. So it's almost like, if it sounds like, I don't know, a young person's voice, does it sound like your 12-year-old son? Is it going to sort of reroute them to certain things? Or how does it find out their preferences early enough to let them feel like they're in control of the experience? Because I think, to your point earlier, when you're talking about, it's not choose your own adventure as such, but be able to know that things are more personalized from the get-go. Don't be like, oh, push one for this. And then, find out that you're number 400 in the queue, but your call is important to us. It's that whole situation that could be a callback service, for example, like, put me in control as the customer, not just a process that your business wants to do to me. So, yeah, I think you've got some really good points there about AI, Marius. I think it's still the testing phase, and how do you then treat it almost as another layer? So you're understanding the end-to-end experience and what it is that customers want, and then doing experiments at certain stages, I would say.
And maybe a step farther, right? But the metaverse. How can we incorporate the metaverse in our customer experience?
It's the same kind of thing, isn't it? It's like when it makes sense, right? So if you're trying to teach me how to fix something on my car, it might make more sense than if I'm just calling about something kind of simple and straightforward. So I think there's a sense making around what does user-centered design look like, and if this technology, if we think about, the customer need, and then we think about the experience that we're trying to create for them, and then the technology actually comes in and fulfills whichever needs are required. So it's kind of it's a bit of a jigsaw in terms of, definitely not starting with the technology. That's what I would 100% say, is that, yes, there's lots of things that people kind of can act like magpies around, with brand new shiny things, but it's not about that. It's taking it right back to human-centered design, to humanity. This whole conversation even about, is AI going to, is artificial intelligence going to replace my job? No, because maybe there's an opportunity to dial up more of the human aspects, right? So where can humans empathize more, and machine learning and algorithms and AI, where can that do things that humans find dull, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. And even if for instance, we have a big problem here in the Netherlands with healthcare, right? Where they're actually lacking a lot of time to do the empathy stuff, but they have to do a lot of the admin stuff. And for me personally, that's also, sort of customer experience as well, because you would like to put that human touch in that healthcare as well. And with AI, we can actually, work more smart, more efficient, and have that more of the human touch. So I think indeed it can definitely help, make the experience better for a lot of different industries, different groups of people. And I totally agree with that as well. Yeah, but it takes a lot of time, and especially as Marius also pointed out, we shouldn't just do it and go for it. May first collect the data and see what actually works before we start doing it.
Just to kind of make sense. Does it even make sense to do it? Like, that's the thing. You could spend, there's that whole terrible, overly used phrase, which is like, build it and they'll come. But they also might have a horrible experience if you don't build it in conjunction and engage with them. And I think, I come from a background also of collaborative work, and so I'm very much in you have to have a certain amount of engagement and collaboration from your client or your customer in order to create something which is worthy of their time, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, I think it was a really good conversation, and we're almost coming to an end now. But there's always one question that we have, and we are of course inviting more people in the podcast, and maybe this is both directed to Fiona and to you, Marius, as well. So what we are wondering is, who would be a person that we should actually invite for this podcast that would be really interesting to talk to about customer experience and the engagement?
Well, I think, when it comes back to a lot of the stuff, it all comes back to kind of human behaviors and, people who are involved in that side of things. So, I would be inviting somebody like the inventor of the cochlear implant in Australia. His name's Graham London Clark. And this just shows you how hard it is to innovate within certain professions like healthcare and to have empathy. And he actually cites in his book that, when you see people, when you're watching people hear their parents' voice for the very first time, you realize the empathizing and the level of empathy, but also the level of technical skill required there. But I feel like to be called, a clown in your own industry when you're trying to innovate, and to be called, to be kind of said that what you're doing is not right, from an integrity perspective. I think that there's a lot of people who it's only really their own faith that gets them through those times. So I would love to see somebody from healthcare who's managed to do amazing things.
Oh, nice one. And Marius, have you given it a thought?
When you asked it, I started panicking because there's quite a few people. But I would probably say, like I mentioned earlier, Seth Godin for me is one of the people I admire, because he actually puts a lot of thought in when you start building a product or a service to actually think about the humans that you're servicing or serving first, or the community or the tribe. So he would be a good one. And I'd say one company that I also have a lot of admiration for building customer journeys would probably be the healthcare fund that I belong to here in Australia. We have so many healthcare funds, and they make it really easy for you to go from one to the other because you can get a free pair of, I don't know, sneakers, or you get. And I've actually been so loyal to my health fund, HBF, just purely because they're very customer centric and to a personal level. That I'll phone in sometimes and they'll say, "Hey, we know we got a claim for your son when he had this disease. How's he doing now?" It's little things like that actually tells me they care. And even though they're not the cheapest fund or has the best products, I've got that loyalty because I can identify with them, because they really, maybe at a superficial level, I don't know, but they really know me as a member. And I appreciate that, and that gives my brand loyalty to them, and it'll take a lot for me to move to another fund. So I'll find out for you, Elize, who's the customer experience manager or customer manager for HBF, and let's get them on a podcast. Yeah. Oh, the other person, and I'm not sure who the individual is, but I used to work for a company called Macquarie Telecom, and Macquarie Telecom as a telco globally wins the customer service award, and everything that we used to do in that business was focused on delivering customer outcomes, and even part of our salary and bonuses were tied to the fact to our NPS score. And so they were one of the first companies globally that built and adopted the NPS scoring system. And it might be a good conversation because telcos typically have the worst. You were talking about your provider, where for a telco to have an NPS sitting between 75 and 78 is quite phenomenal. So I'll have to get back to you with a name, but I will.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. So I'm guessing that you're still running around on old sneakers if you've been so loyal to your health care provider.
I wear barefoot sneakers and nobody sells them. I've got to import them from Europe. So.
Well, thanks a lot, both of you. It was a really good conversation. I would like to thank you for your time and wish you both a good evening.
Thanks,
Amazing.
Elize.
Thank you so much,
Fiona.
That's a wrap for this episode of Unlock CX, brought to you by Anywhere 365. Did you enjoy it? Leave us a review and share your comments. Oh, and be sure to subscribe as we continue to explore customer engagement strategies that unlock memorable experiences.